In ancient Rome, pants were unusual and offensive. What we now see as practical and ordinary once carried a heavy cultural weight. For the Romans, trousers belonged to the world beyond their borders, a world they considered crude, unruly, and inferior. To wear pants in Rome wasn't just a fashion misstep, it was a public declaration of foreignness. The association was clear. Trousers were worn by the Gauls, the Germans, and the Persians, peoples whom the Romans labeled as barbarians. These groups chose pants for obvious reasons: colder climates, mobility in combat, and practicality in daily life. But Roman opinion wasn't shaped by usefulness, it was shaped by identity. The toga stood at the center of Roman visual culture. Its flowing lines and careful drape signaled status, dignity, and above all, citizenship. Only freeborn Roman men could wear it. It was awkward, hot, and required assistance to arrange properly, but it wasn't meant to be comfortable. It was meant to be Roman. Trousers, by contrast, were seen as tight, inelegant, and foreign. They clashed with Roman ideals of masculine virtue, which valued restraint and tradition over novelty and comfort. The reaction went beyond taste. It became law. In 397 AD, Emperor Honorius issued a decree forbidding anyone from wearing pants within the city of Rome. The order wasn't symbolic. Punishments included exile. This resistance didn't come from logic. It came from pride. The Romans believed their way of dressing reflected the superiority of their values. To accept trousers was to blur the line between Roman and barbarian, a line they worked hard to maintain. What's remarkable is that this aversion endured for centuries, even as contact with northern peoples increased. In the Roman imagination, to adopt trousers was to move closer to the frontier, not just in geography, but in identity. In ancient Rome, clothing was more than protection from the elements. It was a visual system of order, carefully coded to show who belonged, who ruled, and who was excluded. The toga remained the centerpiece of this system. Reserved for male citizens, it was worn during official ceremonies, public events, and moments of political display. Heavy and impractical, it required skill to drape and maintain. But that was the point. Wearing a toga wasn't about ease. It was a declaration of status, discipline, and Roman identity. No outsider could wear one. No slave could imitate it. The folds of fabric separated citizen from foreigner, privilege from subjugation. For daily life, Romans favored the tunica, a simpler garment, easier to wear in the Mediterranean heat. But even the tunica varied by class and occasion. Some were belted high or low, others dyed subtly to reflect social position. Women wore the stola, another symbol tied directly to marital status and citizenship. Children too had clothing specific to their age and rank. These garments told a silent story. A Roman could walk into a forum and understand a stranger's place in society before a word was spoken. Clothing revealed more than wealth. It reflected character, morality, and one's relationship to the Roman state. This belief wasn't unique to Rome. Greek thinkers too equated their flowing garments with cultural superiority. In their view, structured robes symbolized reason, order, and civilization, values they saw lacking in those beyond their borders. In contrast, the close-fitting trousers of the Persians appeared excessive, flamboyant, and strange. Romans adopted that same suspicion. They saw elaborate embroidery and brightly colored fabrics as signs of weakness or indulgence. Simplicity wasn't just aesthetic, it was virtue. Anything that deviated from that, including pants, was viewed as morally questionable. To change how one dressed meant more than changing fabric. It meant challenging the boundaries of Roman identity. And in a world where appearance defined belonging, that challenge rarely went unnoticed. For all its symbolism, Roman clothing had its limits. Ideals clashed with climate, and tradition couldn't always overcome geography. The toga, while central to Roman identity, was rarely worn outside ceremonial life. Too heavy for daily tasks and ill-suited to movement, it gradually gave way to more functional garments in day-to-day settings. Even the simpler tunica, better adapted to warm weather, struggled in regions beyond the Mediterranean. As the Roman Empire expanded northward, soldiers faced an entirely different reality. In Britannia, Germania, and the territories along the Danube, cold winds and harsh winters turned exposed legs into a liability. Roman uniformity met northern terrain and lost. The frontier demanded adaptation. Soldiers needed warmth, mobility, and durability. Woolen leggings, wrapped coverings, and eventually full trousers began appearing in military gear. At first, these changes were quiet, practical responses to unbearable conditions, but over time they became standard. This evolution didn't come easily. Roman officers hesitated to approve garments associated with conquered peoples. Accepting trousers meant borrowing from the very cultures Rome claimed to dominate. Yet, necessity forced their hand. A frozen legion was a useless legion. Ideology had to bend where skin could freeze. In written records, there's little pride in this shift. The sources speak more of survival than transformation. No triumphal monument celebrated the first Roman in trousers. There was no public decree embracing the change. It happened slowly, in silence, and at the edge of empire. The further from Rome, the weaker the grip of its traditions. Clothing revealed that weakness. On the frontier, soldiers didn't have the luxury of symbolism. They had to march, dig, fight, and endure. Fabric choices became decisions of life and death, not culture. This was the moment where Roman identity began to fracture. Not in rebellion, not in defeat, but in the simple act of putting on what worked. Change didn't arrive in Rome through debate. It came quietly, through cold mornings on distant borders and the slow erosion of tradition under pressure. By the 4th century, Roman soldiers stationed in northern provinces wore trousers regularly. These weren't fashion statements, they were tools. Woolen leggings and stitched pants provided insulation where the toga offered none. The further a legion marched from the Mediterranean, the more foreign the uniform became. Over time, practicality began to outweigh symbolism. Generals allowed deviations from the standard dress code to maintain efficiency and morale. Troops who patrolled the forests of Germania or the hills of Britannia couldn't afford to dress like senators in the Forum. Layered tunics, cloaks, and pants became standard issue not by decree, but by demand. There was no official celebration of this shift. Roman tradition didn't welcome it. In the city, the elite still clung to draped fabrics and ceremonial garments. But beyond the capital, necessity rewrote the rules. Even officers, once reluctant to wear anything associated with non-Roman customs, accepted the new standard when their survival depended on it. Trousers never became a mark of honor in Rome. They remained practical, regional, and unofficial, but they stayed. What began as a barbarian garment became part of the military's daily uniform. The empire had absorbed the very thing it once outlawed. This transformation didn't end in triumph. It ended in silence. As imperial authority weakened and local cultures reclaimed power, the strict codes of Roman clothing dissolved. Identity was no longer defined by folds of fabric. The line between Roman and outsider blurred, not in battle, but in fabric stitched for warmth. And so, what Rome once rejected became something it could no longer ignore.